All right, geometry. We are going to do this review. I'm going to be doing it on here because it'll be easier to write on. Um, Let me do it on here. There we go. All right, cool. All right, let's do this. At the top of each page, it says SOHCAHTOA. That's what we're going to use when we do trigonometry. But number 1 and 2 is not trigonometry, and I'll show you why. It says a rectangle has two sides of 15 and two sides of 9. Hold on one second. And it says the diagonal is drawn. So, and by the way, that's supposed to be a 17. My bad. Okay. Uh, the diagonal is drawn with x. What is the value of x? Now, if you want to think about this, one second. So if we are using this triangle, we are going to need to find, we know this is 9, so this is 9. So we're going to find a missing side using Pythagorean Theorem. So that's a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So that's 9 squared plus 17 squared equals c squared. Okay. Now, to get rid of this squared, we're going to square root. So that missing side is really 9 squared plus 17 squared, and then with the square root sign over it. Now we can do that in our calculator, our Desmos calculator. So again, square root, 9 squared plus 17 squared. 9 squared, there's a squared button right there, plus 17 squared. We get 19.235. Okay, the closest answer would be letter A. Oh, whoops, I'm at the wrong thing. Letter A. All right. So remember, Pythagorean theorem, it's a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and the hypotenuse across from 90 degrees is c. All right. Here's a similar one. It says, what's the value of x? Now remember, a and b are next to 90. C is across from 90. That's the hypotenuse. When we do Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. We're going to do x squared plus 20 squared equals 35 squared. Now when we solve for x, we're going to subtract the 20 squared on both sides. And these don't actually subtract, so it's important that we just write x squared equals 35 squared minus 20 squared. And then our last step to get rid of that square is square root. All right. So what we're going to put in the calculator is square root 35 squared minus 20 squared. Square root 35 squared minus 20 squared. And we get 28.72. And we're rounding to the nearest 10th place, so we get C. Let's try that one more time. C. All right. So when you're missing a leg, that you're gonna have to subtract in your Pythagorean theorem. When you're missing the hypotenuse, like on number 1, you're gonna add them. Okay. Now let's look at number 3. We should be really good at SOHCAHTOA, labeling OH and A. That's what it says for us to do. Label the opposite, the O, the adjacent, the A, and the hypotenuse, the H, or what I call OH and A, starting at angle Y. So starting at angle Y, the opposite is right across here at O. Across from 90 is always my H, and the leftover one is next to Y, A adjacent. Okay. Now, which one of these answer choices looks like that? Well, letter A does. Okay. Cool. And you can be putting all of these into your Go formative as well. I know you can click in those, okay? All right, let's look at number 4. Now, what is cos y? C-O-S-Y. Now, remember, So TOA, this is what tells us what cosine is. Cosine of an angle is equal to the adjacent side over the hypotenuse side. Okay. A over H. That's the way we say it. I know it's kind of ugly looking because it's hard to draw on a laptop. So the question is, what's the cosine of y? Okay. So starting at y, I want to label O. I want to label H. Label A. Okay. I always label O, H, and A so that way I can figure out what the cosine is, which is supposed to be A over H. So what's A? What's H? A over H is going to be 15 over 17, which is going to be letter C. If I said sine, you would use O over H. If I said tangent, you would use O over A, right? You're going to use SOHCAHTOA to help you out, all right? Which equation would you write for solve the missing value of x, okay? So now here's my given angle right here, right? I know there wasn't an arc there, but I put an arc at my angle. Once again, I'm going to label O, H, and the leftover is A. Now you see how O has a 14, A has an X, but H has nothing. Cross out the one that has nothing. I don't need no H in my life, okay? So all I have is O, A. Now you tell me, using this up here, which one's only O and A? Isn't that TOA, tan? Okay, tan of an angle equals O over A, right? So down here it'll be tan of what angle? Well, we started at 13 equals O over A, which is 14 over X. So tan 13 equals 14 over X is letter B. All right, and then you don't have to solve it because it just said to set it up. Now let's talk about inverses. Which expression would provide the measure of angle C? So again, angle C is right here. Let's put a little arc there. And let's label O, H, and A. All right. Now, this one's kind of tough because it gives us multiple ones. If I was going to be doing, since I'm finding an angle, it's going to be inverse. If I was doing sine inverse, I would be doing O over H, because remember, so ka toa, right? Okay, so sine would be O over H, which would be 48 over 73. Is that one of my answers? Hey, it is. Okay. What if it was cosine inverse? A over H would be 55 over 73. Is that an answer choice? No. And what if it was tangent inverse? Tangent inverse is O over A, which is 48 over 55. And then 48, but not a 55. So, all right. So remember that's inverse trig. So we got number 7. Let's go back to Pythagorean Theorem. A pole was struck by lightning and fell over. According to the figure, how tall was the pole before the lightning struck? Now, this one's kind of tricky because we're going to be asked to take this and this, and you have to add them together at the very end. That's where people forget. But let's do this. I know my A, I know my B, and I don't know my C. So I'm going to use Pythagorean Theorem. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. So that's 12 squared plus 16 squared equals C squared. And again, to get rid of that squared, square root. So I know my C is 12 squared plus 16 squared. Let's do that real quick. 12, the square root of 12 squared plus 16 squared. Now, when I did that, I got 20 for my answer. So that means this side right here is 20. And if you thought the answer was A, you'd be wrong. Why isn't the answer 20? Because it says how tall was the pole before the lightning struck. We have to add the two parts. So remember, this is a pole. This part's 20, and then up and down, this part's 12. So what do you got to do? Add them up. 12 plus 20 is 32. Okay, so the answer is D. That's a tricky one. You're going to see one just like that on your test. Okay. All right, number 8. So here's my angle. I'm going to label O, H, and A. O has nothing on it. So when I think of A and H, hopefully you think of cosine, ka. So cosine 37 equals A over H, x over 12. And then what we're going to do is solve for x. So to get rid of that divided by 12, we're going to do times 12. And if I do it on one side, I'm going to do it on the other side, times 12. Okay. So in the end, x equals cosine 37 times 12 outside the parentheses. So let's do that in our calculator. Cosine 37 outside the parentheses times 12. 7 outside the parentheses times 12. I got 9.58. Again, we're rounding to 1 decimal point. That'll be letter E. Okay. Number 9. Again, start at our angle they gave us, which is x. So I'm going to label the opposite side. Here's 90, so the hypotenuse side, and then the adjacent side. Do you see how h has nothing on it? So I don't need h, right? I'm going to think about it. So katoa, O and A, O and A has to be t, which is tangent. Tangent, and then the angle is x equals O over A, 36 over 16. If you remember from my personal notes, the way that you can move a trig to the other side is if you make it inverse. So the tan goes away, x is by itself. Tan is now on the right side, but it becomes an inverse. It has a little -1 right there. Because whenever we have missing angles, we're using inverse trig. 36 over 16. So how do I type tan inverse 36 over 16? Well, in your calculator, what you're going to do is you're going to see right here where it says main, you're going to go over here to func, okay? And the second line is your inverses. So tan inverse, and we're doing 36 over 16. Back to main, 36 over 16. All right, let's try that again. 36 over 16. And I get 66.037, which we know is rounding to 66. All right. 10 might look weird, but that is correct. This is my angle at 55. I'm looking for the height of this building, so here's my x, right? And my opposite, my hypotenuse, my adjacent. I don't need h because there's nothing there. OA is once again tan. So again, tan 51 equals O, which is x, over A, which is 57. Okay. Again, to get rid of the bottom divided by 57, we multiply by 57 on both sides. So x equals tan 51 times 57 outside the parentheses. Tan 51 times 57 outside the parentheses. And we get 70.389. which we know rounds to 70. All right, 5 more. These next 3 are pretty, hopefully not too bad. Remember, SOHCAHTOA is up here. We want to find, using this big picture, using angle V, the sine of V. So starting at V, let's label the opposite across from 90, the hypotenuse, and the adjacent. Right? Now, sine we know is O over H. So what's O over H going to be? O over H is 15 over 17. So my answer is B. Okay, 12 is cosine. Ca, A over H. So A over H is going to be 8 over 17. That's going to be letter A. And then tan, well, we know tan is TOA. So O over A is going to be 15 over 8, which is going to be letter D. Not too bad. All right, last but not least, these last 2. Another typo here. This is supposed to be 30. This is supposed to be 40. Is it a right triangle? Okay. So here's what you always want to do. Is this a right triangle if a squared plus b squared question mark equals c squared? So if we have 20 squared plus 30 squared, does it equal question mark 40 squared? Let's do a quick calculation. 20 squared plus 30 squared. And then what's 40 squared? Wait, did I type the right numbers? So 20, 30, and 40 all together, do they equal? So 20 plus 30 is 1300, 40 squared is 1600. Are those equal? No. So it is not right because they are not equal. You see that little not equal sign right there. Okay. All right. And then last but not least, what is the measure of R? Okay, so once again, label O, H, and A. Cross out O. Let's remember SOHCAHTOA. Sorry, it's so ugly. It's hard to write on this laptop. If we only have A and H, we know we're going to have cosine of an angle R equals A over H, 9.1 over 14. And then we can move this trig to the other side if we make it a little inverse with a negative 1. So R equals cosine inverse 9.1 over 14. Okay, cosine inverse 9.1 over 14. 49.45. All right, which rounds up to that. All right. So that is our review. So make sure you knock this out, do your best, and be ready for your test on next class.